Imagine waking up and your vision is just completely blurry.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Right. So you manage to stumble out to the car, you carefully drive to the eye doctor, and you sit down in the examination chair. And you just tell the doctor, hey, I can't see a thing.
Yeah, you expect them to pull out the charts, right? The little lenses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the doctor doesn't pull out any instruments. He doesn't ask you to read letters off a chart. Instead, he just takes off his own glasses, shoves them into your hands, and says, here, try these. I've been wearing them for 10 years, and they work perfectly for me.
Wow. Okay. That's a completely insane scenario.
It totally is. So you put them on, and obviously everything is worse. You tell him, I still can't see. And the doctor gets incredibly frustrated and says, what is wrong with you? They work great for me. Just try harder to see through them.
Yeah, you would never go back to that doctor.
Never. You would never trust a medical professional who prescribes a solution without actually diagnosing the problem first. Yet, according to the massive stack of source material we are looking at today, you and I do this exact absurd thing to our friends, our spouses, and our coworkers, like almost every single day.
It's a really jarring realization, isn't it? We operate under this assumption that our way of seeing the world is the objective truth.
Right.
And when someone comes to us with a problem, our first instinct is just to hand them our own glasses. We prescribe our own life experiences before we even attempt to diagnose their reality. It's basically the ultimate communication failure.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. We are jumping right into the deep end today because we're looking at a really transformational journey. We're going to completely dismantle how you interact with the world and rebuild it.
A total structural overhaul.
Exactly. We have this mountain of insights drawn from the 25th anniversary edition of Stephen R. Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And we are not just skimming the core text here.
No, we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, we are pulling from retrospective insights. There's this phenomenal foreword by the business researcher Jim Collins, and dozens of real-world testimonies from CEOs, educators, leaders, people who have actually battle-tested these concepts.
And I think the mission of our deep dive today is to really demystify these 7 habits, because for a lot of people, the title alone sounds like, 1980s business jargon.
Oh, totally. It sounds like something you'd see on a motivational poster in a break room with like a picture of a mountain climber.
Exactly. But our goal is to prove that these are not corporate buzzwords. They aren't just productivity hacks. They are timeless, universal, natural laws. And we are going to break down the mechanics of these laws so you can actually apply them to your daily routine tomorrow morning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the claim that these are natural laws is a massive statement.
It really is.
Most self-help material out there is basically selling you a Band-Aid, right? It's selling a shortcut. But this material demands a total structural overhaul of your character. So before we can talk about time management or resolving workplace conflicts, we really have to look at the foundation. You cannot hack a natural system. So where does this whole philosophy even begin?
It actually begins with a historical analysis of how we define success. So Covey reviewed 200 years of success literature published in the United States, going all the way back to 1776.
Oh, that's a lot of reading.
Yeah, and what he found was this stark, almost disturbing divide. For the first 150 years, think of literature like Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, the focus was almost entirely on what he calls the character ethic.
The character ethic, meaning things like integrity, humility, temperance, courage, justice, patience, those kinds of things.
Precisely. The underlying premise of the character ethic is that there are basic principles of effective living. You can only experience true success and enduring happiness if you learn those principles and integrate them deeply into your basic character. It's foundational.
Right.
But then, right around the end of World War I, something shifted in the cultural consciousness.
Like the rise of the mass media, right, and the
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution pushing people into different types of corporate structures.
Exactly. The last 50 to 70 years of success literature shifted abruptly away from character. It moved toward what the text calls the personality ethic. Success became a function of personality, of public image, of attitudes and behaviors.
So it became all about public relations and techniques.
Yes, how to smile, how to win friends, how to negotiate, how to project a certain image to get what you want. It split into 2 paths. One was positive mental attitude, the fake till you make it mindset, and the other was outright manipulation, using psychological tricks to get people to like you or buy your product.
I look at the personality ethic, kind of like applying an Instagram filter to a terrible photograph.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You take this blurry, badly composed picture, and instead of learning how to actually use the camera, instead of adjusting the aperture or fixing the lighting, you just slap a high contrast filter over it. And you hope it looks artistic. It's a superficial fix.
It is. An Instagram filter doesn't change the reality of the photo, it just alters the perception temporarily. And the text points out that trying to use the personality ethic without the underlying character ethic is mathematically destined to fail in the long run.
Because you can't fake it forever.
Exactly. There's an analogy used in the source material that really drives this home. They say trying to use personality techniques is like trying to cram on a farm.
Right. We all know what cramming is in school. You goof off all semester, you don't do the reading, and then the night before the final exam, you stay up until 4 in the morning.
Drinking your weight in coffee.
Yeah, exactly. You memorize a bunch of facts, and maybe you actually pass the test. Because the school system is an artificial system. So you can sometimes get away with an artificial, temporary effort, but imagine trying that on a farm.
It's comical to even picture. You forget to prepare the soil in the spring. You just play video games and ignore the crops all summer.
Sounds like a relaxing summer, but a terrible farming strategy.
Right. And then in the fall, you suddenly run out into the field and try to cram. You try to instantly grow wheat overnight through sheer willpower and a positive mental attitude.
Which is physically impossible.
Right, because the farm is a natural system. The price must be paid and the process must be followed. You reap exactly what you sow. There are absolutely no shortcuts.
And the argument here is that human behavior, and specifically human relationships, are exactly like the farm. They're natural systems.
100%.
You can't cram for a successful marriage. If you spent 10 years ignoring your spouse, you can't just take them on one expensive weekend vacation and expect deep, enduring trust to instantly materialize. You can't cram for genuine respect from your employees. The personality ethic tricks us into believing we can bypass the law of the harvest.
And this brings us to the immense difficulty of adopting the character ethic. Because if we have been operating on quick fixes and filters our whole lives, changing our underlying character requires breaking deeply ingrained habits.
This is where I have to bring up my favorite metaphor from the research. They compare breaking bad habits to the Apollo 11 moon launch.
Oh, the gravity pull.
Yes. Think about the sheer physics of getting a rocket off the ground. The Apollo 11 spacecraft used more energy in the first few minutes of liftoff just to break out of the Earth's gravitational pull than it used in the entire subsequent journey across 500,000 miles to the moon.
That is wild to think about.
Right. The initial thrust required to defy gravity is astronomical. Habits have that exact same gravitational pull.
They absolutely do. Procrastination, impatience, selfishness, the need to always be right. These aren't just minor quirks. They are gravitational forces that dictate the trajectory of your life.
So how do we actually escape that gravity? Because it's one thing to say, oh, I need to be more patient. But when the alarm goes off at 6 in the morning, or when a coworker sends a really passive-aggressive email, the gravity of my old reactive habits pulls me right back down. What gives us the thrust to launch?
To generate that thrust, you have to anchor yourself to universal natural laws. You have to realize that you are not inventing a new way of living. You are aligning yourself with forces that have always existed.
And what's fascinating here is that Stephen Covey did not invent the 7 habits.
No, he is very clear about that. He simply observed them, identified them, and put them into a sequential framework. These principles, things like fairness, human dignity, service, excellence, they are found in every major enduring society throughout history.
They transcend culture entirely.
Exactly. They are the common denominators of all 6 major world religions.
The text includes a fantastic quote from the legendary filmmaker Cecil B. DeMille. He directed the epic movie The Ten Commandments. And he said, "It is impossible for us to break the law. We can only break ourselves against the law."
That is the crux of the character ethic. Principles are like lighthouses. Lighthouses do not move to accommodate the ships that are sailing by.
Right. The ships must navigate by the lighthouses, or they will crash against the rocks.
If you try to argue with a lighthouse, you are going to lose every single time. If you build your life on the principle of deceit, you might get away with it in the short term. You might win a negotiation or get a promotion, but eventually you will break yourself against the natural law of trust. The consequences are inevitable.
Okay, so if these principles are the unmoving lighthouses, what is the ultimate natural law of effectiveness? What is the core rule that governs all 7 of these habits?
It is a concept called the PPC balance. And to explain it, the source material relies on Aesop's classic fable of the goose and the golden egg.
Oh, I think everyone vaguely remembers this from childhood.
Yeah, a poor farmer walks out to his goose's nest one morning and finds a glittering, solid gold egg. At first, he thinks it's a prank. He takes it to town, gets it appraised, and it's pure gold.
The ultimate lottery ticket.
Right. The next morning, there's another egg, and the next. He becomes fabulously wealthy. But wealth changes his psychology.
Greed sets in. He becomes impatient. He realizes he's getting exactly one golden egg per day, and he thinks, well, why should I wait? If this goose is laying golden eggs, it must be full of gold inside. I'll just cut it open and get all the gold right now.
And we know how that ends.
He kills the goose, slices it open, and finds absolutely nothing. It's just a regular goose on the inside. No golden eggs, and more importantly, no way to ever get another golden egg because the goose is dead.
That fable is the perfect representation of the fundamental paradigm of effectiveness. Effectiveness is an equation. The golden eggs represent production, or P. These are the desired results we want in our lives.
The paycheck, the clean house, the successful project launch, the A on the report card.
Right. The goose represents production capability, or PC. That is the asset or the capacity that produces the results. And honestly, that asset is you. It's your physical health, your mental sharpness, your relationships, your team.
If I'm burning the candle at both ends, let's say I'm working 80 hours a week, surviving on 3 hours of sleep, purely fueled by caffeine and anxiety, just trying to get a massive project done, I might get a lot of golden eggs for a week or two.
You might hit the deadlines.
Exactly. But I am fundamentally destroying the goose. I am going to burn out, end up in the hospital, and suddenly my production drops to absolutely zero. I've killed the goose to get the eggs.
We see this everywhere. A manager who uses fear and intimidation to force their team to meet a quarterly quota is focused entirely on PO. The golden eggs, they get the numbers. But what happens to the PC?
The team's morale plummets.
Trust is destroyed, the best employees quit, and the following quarter, production collapses. Conversely, if you only take care of the goose and never focus on production, if you just go to the gym, meditate, and read books all day but never actually work or produce value, you starve.
Right, you still need eggs to eat.
True effectiveness is the delicate, constant balance between the two.
And realizing that we need to balance the goose and the egg requires us to grow up, frankly. The text maps this out as a journey called the maturity continuum. We all begin life as infants, totally dependent on others.
Dependence is the paradigm of you. You take care of me. You come through for me. You are to blame if something goes wrong.
If you have a dependent mindset as an adult, you're basically a victim. Your emotional state relies entirely on how other people treat you.
The goal, as we mature, is to move from dependence to independence. This is the paradigm of I. I am responsible. I am self-reliant. I can choose my own path.
Now, hold on. Because this is where society usually throws a massive parade. We celebrate independence as the absolute pinnacle of human existence. The self-made billionaire, the lone wolf entrepreneur, the person who doesn't need anybody. We are conditioned to think independence is the finish line.
It is celebrated, but the text argues it is not the highest peak of human maturity. Independence is necessary, but it is incomplete. The highest level is interdependence.
Interdependent.
Yes, this is the paradigm of we. We can do it. We can cooperate. We can combine our unique talents to create something massively greater than either of us could achieve alone.
Because life is highly interdependent. We live in an interdependent society, an
Yeah.
interdependent economy. To try to navigate an interdependent reality with merely an independent mindset is like trying to play a symphony with just one instrument. It's limiting.
But the catch, and this is a brilliant architectural point in the book's structure, is that you cannot jump straight from dependence to interdependence. You can't just decide to be a great team player if you don't have control over yourself.
Right. You have to win the private victory before you can win the public victory.
Exactly right. You have to master your own character before you can effectively engage with others. And that is exactly what the first 3 habits are designed to do. They are the tools to move you from dependence to true independence.
So let's dive into that internal battle. Habit 1, be proactive. Now, when I hear the word proactive, I usually think of a corporate buzzword. Like, we need our sales team to be more proactive. It usually just means taking initiative or working faster.
But the definition in this research goes so much deeper than that. It touches on the very definition of what makes us human. Being proactive means recognizing the fundamental gap between a stimulus and your response.
The gap. I want to spend some time here because this is the hinge upon which everything else swings. Let me try an analogy. Imagine you accidentally knock a sharp kitchen knife off the counter.
Okay.
That is the stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
Instinctively, you might try to catch it to stop it from hitting the floor. That is an immediate, unthinking reaction, and you're probably going to slice your hand open.
Oh, definitely.
But as a human, you have a split-second gap. The knife falls, and in that tiny fraction of a second, you can observe the situation, realize the danger, and consciously choose to step back and let it hit the floor. The gap is where your freedom lies. Animals don't really have this. They are programmed largely by instinct and conditioning. But humans have self-awareness. We can actually stand apart from ourselves and observe our own thought processes.
That self-awareness is our greatest gift. It raises a very uncomfortable question for most people, though. Are your behaviors a function of your conditions or your decisions?
Wow, that's a heavy question.
Reactive people build their emotional lives around their conditions. If the weather is good, they feel good. If it's raining, it affects their attitude and their performance. If a coworker ignores them in the hallway, they become defensive and their entire day is ruined. They are constantly being acted upon.
Where's proactive people?
Proactive people carry their own weather with them. It doesn't matter if it's raining or shining. Their behavior is a product of their conscious choices, based on their deeply held values.
There is a fantastic, highly specific detail in the text about a college football quarterback that illustrates this perfectly. This guy was incredibly talented, but he had a problem. Whenever he made a mistake on the field, if he threw an interception or fumbled the ball, he would spiral.
He would beat himself up mentally.
Exactly. And it would bleed into the next play.
Yeah.
He was reacting to his conditions. So he developed a physical mechanism to force himself into the gap. He started wearing a rubber wristband. Whenever he made a catastrophic mistake, the stimulus occurred. But before he reacted, he would reach down and literally snap the rubber band against his wrist.
That's brilliant.
It was a sharp physical trigger that mentally closed the loop on the mistake. It was his way of saying, okay, that happened. I acknowledge it. Now, what is my conscious choice for the very next play? He forced the gap open.
That is a phenomenal example of applied proactivity. Success is often found on the far side of failure, but only if you choose to learn from it rather than react to it. And we can diagnose our own proactivity by looking at where we spend our mental and emotional energy. The text divides our focus into two concentric circles.
The circle of concern and the circle of influence.
Right. The wider circle is your circle of concern. This contains everything you care about but have very little or absolutely no control over. The national debt, the threat of nuclear war, the weather, what your boss secretly thinks of you, the traffic on your commute.
And most people live entirely in the circle of concern. You listen to talk radio, you scroll through social media, you sit in the break room and complain about executive management. You are pouring all your energy into things you cannot change.
And the language of the circle of concern is completely disempowering. It's always, I have to do this. I can't believe they did that. If only I had more money. He makes me so mad. He makes me so mad. Think about that phrase. You are literally transferring control of your own emotional state to someone else. You're saying, I am not responsible for my anger. He is.
And the tragedy is that when reactive people focus all their energy on the circle of concern, their actual ability to change things, their smaller circle of influence begins to shrink. They neglect the things they actually can control because they are too busy complaining about what they can't.
The circle of influence contains the things you can control. Your health, your reading habits, how you treat your spouse, how you prepare for a meeting, your own reactions.
Proactive people are relentlessly focused on their circle of influence. They don't waste time complaining about the economy. They focus on upgrading their own skills to become indispensable. And their language reflects that power. Instead of, I have to, they say, I choose to. Instead of, he makes me mad, they say, I control my own feelings. And by pouring positive, proactive energy into the things they can control, their circle of influence actually expands. They become more trusted, more capable, and ironically, they eventually gain more influence over the things that used to just be concerns. I love the theory, but I'm thinking about the listener who is exhausted, sitting in traffic right now, feeling completely overwhelmed by their circumstances. How do they actually start doing this today? The text doesn't just leave it at theory, it issues a challenge. The 30-day test.
Yes, the 30-day test is a profound experiment in personal agency. For the next 30 days, you commit to working exclusively within your circle of influence. Make small commitments and keep them. Be a light, not a judge. Be a model, not a critic.
When you make a mistake, admit it, correct it, and learn from it immediately.
Don't get into a blaming, accusing mode. Work on things you have control over. Work on you.
Catch yourself when you start using reactive language. If you hear yourself say, I have to work late tonight, stop. Rewire it. I choose to work late tonight because I value the income or because I want to protect my team. It changes the entire psychological weight of the action. You are no longer a victim of your job. You are a conscious actor. Try that for 30 days and watch the gravity of your old habits start to break.
And once you take the steering wheel of your life with habit 1, you have to decide where you are actually driving. That brings us to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
The core concept here is that all things are created twice. There is a mental creation and then there is a physical creation.
Precisely. If you are going to build a house, you don't just order a truckload of lumber, grab a hammer, and start nailing boards together.
That would be a disaster.
You would end up with a structural disaster. First, you create a blueprint. You decide where the kitchen goes, where the load-bearing walls are. That is the first creation. The physical construction is the second creation.
But in our own lives, we skip the blueprint constantly. We just start hammering. We get caught up in what the text calls the activity trap. We work harder and harder. We answer emails faster. We scramble up the ladder of success, only to get to the top and realize the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall.
It happens all the time.
We achieve a goal, maybe a big promotion or a certain income level, and realize it cost us our health or our marriage, which were actually more important to us.
To prevent that tragedy, the text asks the reader to engage in a deeply visceral exercise. It's called the funeral visualization.
Let's walk the listener through this right now. If you are listening, I want you to actually picture this scenario in your mind's eye. Imagine driving down a quiet street and pulling into the parking lot of a funeral parlor. You park your car, you walk through the front doors, and you smell the distinct scent of the flowers.
You hear soft organ music playing in the background.
You walk into the main chapel, and you see the casket at the front. People are gathered around speaking in hushed tones. You walk up the aisle, you look over the edge of the casket, and you come face to face with yourself. This is your funeral, exactly 3 years from today.
It's intense.
It is. All these people have come to honor you. You take a seat in a pew, and you look at the program. 4 people are scheduled to speak about your life. The first is someone from your immediate family, your spouse, your child, or sibling. The second is one of your close friends. The third is a colleague from your profession. And the fourth is someone from your church or community organization.
Now here is the crucial question. What do you want those 4 people to say about you?
Really think about it. What kind of spouse or parent do you want your family to describe? What kind of friend were you? When your coworker gets up, do you want them to say, oh, he answered emails at 2 a.m.? Or do you want them to say he was a mentor who elevated everyone around him? What character do you want them to have seen in you?
It is a sobering, almost uncomfortable exercise. But it is incredibly powerful because it instantly strips away all the superficial noise, the daily emergencies, the petty office politics, the desire for a slightly nicer car. All of that evaporates. Whatever your honest answers are to those questions, those are your deepest, most fundamental values. That is the end you need to begin with.
Habit 2 is the habit of personal leadership. And there is a huge difference between leadership and management. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things.
Management is efficiency in climbing the ladder. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall.
To lead your life effectively, you have to establish the right center. Whatever sits at the center of your life will be the source of 4 fundamental factors: security, guidance, wisdom, and power.
Security is your sense of worth, your identity, your basic personal strength. Guidance is your source of direction, your internal compass. Wisdom is your perspective on life, your sense of balance. And power is the capacity to act, the strength and potency to accomplish something.
And the fascinating thing is that people center their lives on all sorts of highly unstable things. Some people are completely work-centered. Their identity, their security is entirely tied up in their job title. If they get laid off, they don't just lose their income, they suffer a total collapse of self.
Some people are money-centered. Their sense of worth fluctuates with the stock market.
We even see people who are spouse-centered or family-centered. While family is clearly a high priority, placing it at the absolute center can be dangerous. If you are spouse-centered, your security is entirely dependent on how your spouse treats you today. If they're in a bad mood or if you have an argument, your whole world crumbles. Your guidance is dictated by their passing emotional states. It's an emotional roller coaster.
So if work, money, and even family are unstable centers, what are we supposed to build our blueprint around?
The only stable center, according to the research, is a principal center. Because principles, those lighthouses we talked about earlier, like integrity, fairness, and service, they do not change. They don't have bad days. They don't react to inflation or get angry at you. They don't die.
When your security, guidance, wisdom, and power come from deep, unchanging principles, you become a highly proactive individual. You have an unshakable foundation that allows you to weather the shifting circumstances around you with total clarity.
Okay, so habit 1 gives us the proactive freedom to write the blueprint. Habit 2 is the actual drawing of the blueprint, defining our principles and our end goals. Now we have to actually build the house. We need the physical creation. That is habit 3. Put first things first. This is the habit of personal management. And the text quotes the German writer Goethe, who said, "Things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least."
Habit 3 is where the rubber meets the road. It is the day in, day out exercise of independent will to actually live out the blueprint you designed in Habit 2. And to explain the mechanics of this, the text introduces one of its most famous tools, the time management matrix.
Let's break this down clearly. The matrix divides every single activity in your life into 4 quadrants based on 2 factors, urgent and important.
Urgent means it requires immediate attention. It insists on you. A ringing phone is urgent. A colleague standing at your desk is urgent.
Important, on the other hand, means it contributes to your overall mission, your values, your high priority goals.
Quadrant I is both urgent and important. These are crises, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects. If you have a major client presentation in 2 hours and the slide deck corrupts, that is Quadrant 1. It is important, and you have to fix it right now.
The problem is that many people spend their entire lives living in Quadrant 1. They become crisis managers, constantly putting out fires. And what is the result? Massive stress, burnout, and zero long-term vision.
Then you have Quadrant Third, which is urgent, but not important. This is the phantom quadrant. These are interruptions, most phone calls, popular activities, and meetings that could have been an email.
The danger of Quadrant 3 is that people spend a lot of time here thinking they are in Quadrant 1. They feel busy because they are constantly reacting to urgent things, but those things are actually just other people's priorities, not their own.
And of course, Quadrant Fourth is not urgent and not important. Mindless, busy work, scrolling social media for 3 hours, binge-watching television just to escape. It's pure deterioration.
So I have to push back here, because if I'm a listener, I'm thinking, look, my life is 90% Quadrant R emergencies and 10% Quadrant Fourth escaping from the exhaustion of those emergencies. Where is the magic? How do I get out of this trap?
The magic and the ultimate goal of the highly effective person is to live in Quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 activities are important, but not urgent. This is where you do relationship building, writing your personal mission statement, long-range planning, preventative maintenance, learning a new skill, and physical exercise.
The paradox is that because these things are not urgent, they do not act on this. Your treadmill will never scream at you to get on it. A long-term strategic plan won't call your phone and demand to be written. You have to be proactive to act on them.
But, and here's the genius of it, the more time you spend in Quadrant 2 doing preventative maintenance, the more you actually shrink Quadrant 1. If you regularly maintain your car, which is Quadrant 2, you won't have the engine blow up on the highway, which is Quadrant 1.
Exactly. But bridging the gap from theory to reality is hard. How do you practically force yourself to live in Quadrant 2 when the world is throwing Quadrant 2 crises at you?
This is where we get incredibly practical. Let's walk through the literal 4-step scheduling process outlined in the text. And the most vital rule of this process is that you do not organize by the day. You organize by the week.
Daily planning is too microscopic. It forces you to prioritize whatever is screaming the loudest that day. It keeps you trapped in the urgency illusion. Organizing by the week provides the context needed to focus on importance.
So let's walk through a practical Quadrant 2 organizing session.
Step 1. Set aside a block of time. The text suggests finding a quiet space, maybe a 1 to 2 hour block on a Sunday afternoon before the chaos of the work week begins. You sit down with your calendar, you pull back, and you seek inspiration. You look at your life through the lens of those deep principles you identified during your funeral visualization.
Step 2. Identify your key roles. You are not just a one-dimensional employee. You are a complex human being. Write down the distinct roles you play. You might be a parent, a spouse, a manager at work, a member of a local charity, and most importantly, an individual who needs renewal.
Once you have those roles listed, you set goals for each one. What is 1 or 2 truly important Quadrant 2 goals you can accomplish in each role this week? If you are a parent, maybe the goal is to take your daughter out for a one-on-one lunch. just to listen to her without distractions.
If you are a manager, maybe it's to finally draft that long-term strategic vision document you've been putting off. The text actually shows an example schedule where someone sets 19 different important goals for a single week.
Step 3 is where you schedule the time. You take those 19 goals and you translate them into specific locked-in appointments on your calendar. If your goal as an individual is to exercise for an hour 3 times a week, you lock those blocks into Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning.
And you must treat that appointment with yourself with the exact same level of respect and unbreakability as you would an appointment with the CEO of your company.
And this leads to step 4, which completely shattered my preconceived notions of time management. Because usually when we talk about scheduling, it's about micromanaging every single minute, packing the calendar from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. But step 4 is leave the rest of the schedule open. Daily adapt.
It's all about flexibility.
Wait, I have to challenge this. If I leave massive chunks of my week unscheduled, isn't that just an invitation for chaos to flood back in? Won't I just end up scrolling through emails or getting dragged into pointless meetings?
It sounds counterintuitive, but flexibility is the entire point. If you schedule every single minute, you become a brittle machine. The moment an unexpected crisis hits, a child gets sick, a client threatens to leave, your rigid schedule shatters and you feel immense guilt and frustration.
I get that.
But with Quadrant 2 organizing, you have already put the big rocks in place. Your exercise, your deep work time, your key relationship building, those appointments are secure. The open space allows you to handle unanticipated crises or even spontaneous moments of joy without any guilt. You aren't a slave to the schedule. The schedule serves your principles. You are navigating the week dynamically, knowing the most important things are already protected.
And that profound sense of internal security wraps up the private victory. If you can master those 3 habits, Habit 1, taking total responsibility for your reactions. Habit 2, defining your unshakable values. And Habit 3, scheduling your priorities around those values, you achieve true independence. You have built an impenetrable character base.
But independence is not the end of the line. So now we ask the critical question. How do these internal principles withstand the chaotic, unpredictable pressure of the external world? How do they survive contact with other people?
To find out, we're going to look at how these habits scale. We're going to look at 2 environments that are notorious for extreme stress, friction, and burnout: academia and corporate business. It's one thing to say these habits bring you personal peace while you're meditating on a Sunday. It's another thing entirely to apply them in a room full of screaming 5-year-olds or a failing Fortune 500 company.
The source material provides extraordinary testimonies of organizational transformation. Let's start with managing academic stress and student behavior. The text highlights a woman named Muriel Thomas Summers, who is the principal of A.B. Combs Elementary School. She attended a 7 Habits seminar that was originally designed for high-level corporate executives.
Right.
She looked around the room and had a massive paradigm shift. She thought, why are we waiting until people are 35 years old and entrenched in bad habits to teach them these skills? Why can't we teach this to children?
So she went back to her school, and they started teaching the 7 habits to 5-year-olds. They taught kindergartners about being proactive and seeking win-win solutions.
The results were nothing short of staggering. They saw unprecedented levels of student achievement, a massive reduction in discipline problems, incredibly high teacher retention, and overwhelming parent satisfaction. The school became a national model.
But why did it work so well? Because traditional schooling often operates heavily in the dependence paradigm. The students are dependent on the teachers for motivation, and when they fail, they blame the teacher. The teachers are dependent on the administration, and when the classroom is chaotic, they blame the students or the parents. It's a massive cycle of reactive victimhood.
There is a brilliant, piercing quote in the text regarding this exact dynamic. It talks about inflexible teachers who, when their traditional teaching methods failed to reach certain students, immediately blamed the students, citing various learning disabilities.
They washed their hands of the problem. It was in their circle of concern.
Exactly. But the text points out that when those teachers were forced to step back, proactively examine their own methods, and change their approach to meet the student where they were, the students suddenly succeeded. The quote is, apparent learner disability was nothing more or less than teacher inflexibility.
That is habit 1 in its purest form. The teachers stopped complaining about the raw material of the students and focused entirely on their circle of influence, which was their own teaching methods, and it transformed the educational environment.
But it's not just the teachers. The students can use these habits to manage their own immense academic stress, particularly as they get into high school and college. Think about the anxiety of grading. Students sit there terrified, trying to psychoanalyze the professor to figure out what they want.
But a student operating with Habit 4 Think Win-Win can proactively eliminate that stress. Instead of guessing, they can go to the professor during office hours on the very first week and set up a win-win performance agreement. They can say, "Professor, here is my understanding of the ultimate goals of this course. I want to excel. Can we agree right now on exactly what the specific criteria are for an A, a B, or a C grade?"
It completely changes the power dynamic. It shifts the relationship from a hovering, judging supervisor to a horizontal partnership in success. The expectations are clarified up front, the anxiety evaporates, and the student can focus entirely on production.
Now, if we scale this logic even larger, up to the global corporate world, we see the exact same principles driving massive financial success. And this is where Jim Collins Forward provides incredible context. Collins is the author of Good to Great, one of the most famous business books of all time. He spent years researching what makes a company truly exceptional, and he coined the concept of Level 5 leaders.
A level 5 leader is fascinating because they defy the traditional corporate stereotype. They are not the loud, charismatic, ego-driven savior CEOs who grace magazine covers. Collins found that the greatest leaders possess a paradoxical combination of profound personal humility and intense, fearless professional will.
They are fiercely dedicated to the mission of the company, not their own glory.
And Collins connects his level 5 concept directly to Covey's 7 habits. He notes that you cannot build level 5 leaders by sending them to a weekend seminar on advanced management techniques or negotiation tactics. You build them from the inside out. You have to build their character first. A great company is not just a collection of efficient software and supply chains. It is the collective, deeply ingrained habits of its people.
We see this played out globally in the testimonies provided in the anniversary edition. Consider Paul Mack, the president of Mary Kay in Greater China. In 2001, he launched a massive 7 Habits program across his entire organization. But crucially, they didn't just teach it to the sales managers as a tactic to close more deals. They taught it to everyone, aligning the entire corporate culture under one unified set of character-based values.
The result: they were named the best employer for 10 years straight, and they became the absolute #1 cosmetics brand in sales in China. But it's not just about thriving in good times. The character ethic is what saves a company during a catastrophe.
Yes, the case study of Western Digital in Thailand is a perfect example. Dr. Sampan Silapanad, an executive there, detailed how the facilities were hit by devastating catastrophic floods in 2011. Operations were completely destroyed. When a crisis of that magnitude hits an organization built on the personality ethic, where relationships are superficial, trust is low, and management relies on top-down dictatorial control, the company will shatter. Everyone will panic and look out for themselves.
But Western Digital recovered with miraculous speed. Dr. Salapanad credited the internal culture created by the 7 habits. Because the employees were proactive, because they had high trust and deeply ingrained win-win paradigms, they didn't wait for orders from the top. They spontaneously collaborated, innovated, and rebuilt. The character ethic literally saved the company.
It demonstrates the immense power of moving from vertical, hovering supervision to horizontal partnerships, which provides the perfect bridge into understanding exactly how we achieve those partnerships. We have arrived at the public victory, the art of interdependence, habits 4, 5, and 6.
We've mastered our own character. Now we have to master the incredibly complex world of human relationships. And before we dive into the specific habits, the text introduces a metaphor that I think is the most useful tool for evaluating any relationship in your life: the emotional bank account.
It's a simple but profound concept. Just like a financial bank account of your local branch, you can make deposits into a relationship and you can make withdrawals. But instead of money, the currency is trust. I think of it like a giant Jenga tower of trust. Every time I truly listen to you, every time I apologize sincerely for a mistake, every time I keep a promise, no matter how small, I am carefully placing a block on the tower. I am making a deposit. The trust level rises, the tower gets taller and more stable. If we have a massive balance of trust, our communication is effortless. Even if I say something clumsy or articulate my thoughts poorly, you won't get offended because you trust my underlying intentions.
But the reverse is also true. If I constantly interrupt you, if I belittle your ideas in front of others, if I break my promises or show a lack of respect, I am making withdrawals. I am yanking blocks out of the Jenga tower. If I make too many withdrawals, the account becomes overdrawn. The tower becomes incredibly fragile. Trust evaporates. At that point, communication becomes a minefield. Everything I say is scrutinized for hidden meanings. We end up walking on eggshells around each other.
And this is exactly why the private victory must strictly precede the public victory. There's a story in the text where a frustrated father comes to Covey complaining about his rebellious teenage son. He says, "I just can't understand my son. He won't listen to me at all." And Covey replies, "Let me get this straight. You can't understand your son because he won't listen to you."
The father's emotional bank account with his son was utterly bankrupt, and Covey told him, "You can't talk your way out of problems you behave yourself into."
That is the ultimate failure of the personality ethic.
Mm.
If you have behaved terribly and bankrupted the trust, no amount of smooth-talking, active listening techniques, or psychological manipulation will save the relationship. You need a foundation of solid character to consistently make deposits over time to rebuild the balance.
So, assuming we have a healthy bank account or we are committed to building one, we can deploy habit 4. Think win-win. And let's be extremely clear here, because win-win is another term that has been hijacked by corporate speak.
Oh, for sure.
It is not just a negotiation tactic where we split the difference and compromise. It is a fundamental, deep-seated paradigm of human interaction.
Win-win stems directly from a character of integrity and what the text defines as the abundance mentality. This is the paradigm that there is plenty out there for everybody. There is enough pie for everyone to get a huge slice. It flows out of a deep inner sense of personal worth and security.
Contrast that with how most of the world operates, which is the scarcity mentality. The scarcity mentality views life as a finite pie. If you get a big piece of the pie, that means there's less pie for me. It turns every interaction, every promotion, every grade in school into a zero-sum game. This leads to the win-lose paradigm. I'm going to beat you, I'm going to get my way, and you are going to lose.
The problem is that in a highly interdependent reality, win-lose is ultimately just lose-lose in disguise. If you and I are business partners, and I aggressively negotiate a deal where I take 80% of the profits and leave you with 20%, I might feel like I won today. But I've destroyed our emotional bank account. You will resent me, you won't work hard on the next project, and eventually you will leave. My short-term win results in a massive long-term lose for both of us.
Win-win means we commit to finding a solution that genuinely satisfies both parties, or we agree to walk away what the text calls win-win or no deal. But once we commit to seeking a win-win outcome, we need the actual tools to discover what that outcome is. And that brings us to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Habit 5 is arguably the most profoundly difficult habit to master in the entire book. It requires a complete rewiring of our communication instincts. The core concept is what we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive. Diagnose before you prescribe.
Right, our eye doctor who hands over his own glasses. We laughed at that, but we do it all the time. Someone comes to us, a friend, a spouse, a coworker, and they are hurting or struggling with a problem. And instead of diagnosing, instead of truly listening, we immediately hand them our own glasses. We give what the text calls autobiographical advice. We say, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel. When I was in your situation 10 years ago, here is what I did."
We do it because we are self-centered. We listen not with the intent to genuinely understand the other person's reality, but with the intent to reply. While they are speaking, we are internally preparing our brilliant response. We are filtering everything they say through our own paradigms. The text outlines 4 typical autobiographical responses. We evaluate, we agree or disagree. We probe, we ask questions from our own frame of reference to satisfy our curiosity. We advise, we give counsel based on our own experience. Or we interpret, we try to figure out their motives based on our own behavior.
And none of those responses actually make the other person feel heard. The challenge Habit 5 presents to you, the listener, is to practice empathic listening. Now, empathic listening is not just active listening where you act like a parrot and repeat their last sentence back to them. People see right through that technique.
Empathic listening is a high-level character skill. It means listening with your ears, but more importantly, listening with your eyes and your heart. You listen for feeling, for meaning. You are attempting to get inside their frame of reference. You want to see the world exactly as they see it, to understand their paradigm and to feel how they feel.
And the psychological mechanism behind why this works is beautiful. It's about psychological air. When someone is drowning, they don't care about your advice, they just need air. When someone is highly emotional or struggling, they need the psychological air of being understood. Once you provide that, once they feel deeply, truly, accurately understood, they lower their defenses. They stop fighting to prove their point. And only then, once they are breathing freely, can you move to the second half of the habit, seeking to be understood yourself.
And when you combine the pure motive of win-win, which is habit 4, with the profound skill of empathic listening from habit 5, you arrive at the ultimate pinnacle of human interaction, Habit 6. Synergize.
Synergy, another word that has been beaten to death in corporate boardrooms.
Yeah, completely.
But the core mathematical concept of synergy is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. 1 plus 1 equals 3 or 5 or 50.
It is the essence of creative cooperation. Let's say you and I are looking at a complex problem and we have completely opposite views on how to solve it. In a traditional win-lose paradigm, we fight it out until the most stubborn person wins. In a compromise paradigm, we both give up a little bit of what we want and we meet in the middle with a mediocre solution.
But with synergy, we use our differences as a catalyst. I look at your completely different viewpoint and say, good, you see it differently. Help me see what you see. We communicate empathetically until we fully understand each other, and then we create a third alternative. A solution that is fundamentally better, more creative, and more robust than what either of us originally brought to the table.
To achieve synergy, you must absolutely value the differences between people. Mental, emotional, and psychological differences are not annoyances to be managed. They are the stepping stones to synergy. If two people have the exact same opinion on everything, one of them is completely unnecessary.
To illustrate how poorly our society usually handles differences, the text shares this fabulous fable called The Animal School.
I want to tell this in full because it's so incredibly poignant. Once upon a time, the animals decided they needed to do something heroic to meet the problems of a new world, so they organized a school. They decided to create a standardized core curriculum consisting of running, climbing, swimming, and flying. And to make the administration of the school easier, every single animal had to take every single subject.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it was. So you have the duck. The duck was an absolute prodigy at swimming. In fact, he was better than the instructor. But he was terrible at running. So the administration made him drop his advanced swimming classes to stay after school and practice running. He ran and ran until his webbed feet were completely shredded, which caused his swimming grade to drop to just average. But average was acceptable to the school, so no one cared, except the duck.
That's just sad.
Then you have the rabbit. The rabbit started at the top of the class in running, but he had a nervous breakdown because of the intense remedial makeup work he had to do in swimming.
The eagle was labeled a severe discipline problem. In climbing class, he beat everyone else to the top of the tree, but he stubbornly insisted on using his own method to get there, flying, so he was heavily penalized.
And at the end of the year, an abnormal, bizarrely shaped eel that could swim pretty well and run, climb, and fly just a little bit had the highest overall average and was proudly named the valedictorian.
It's a humorous, slightly ridiculous story, but the underlying truth is profound. It perfectly illustrates our societal tendency to force uniformity and conformity rather than valuing and synergizing diversity. We spend so much administrative and emotional energy trying to make ducks run and rabbits swim. Synergy is about looking at the eagle and the duck and realizing that their drastically different skills, when combined constructively, can solve complex systemic problems that neither could ever solve alone.
It's about unfreezing what the text calls restraining forces, the negative defensive energies in a group, and turning them into driving forces, which are positive, creative energies. When people feel truly valued for their differences, they stop defending their own rigid positions and invest their creative energy into the relationship.
And that triumph of creative cooperation completes the public victory. We've successfully navigated the entire journey from dependence through independence to interdependence. But as we look at the entire system we've just built, we face a critical reality. We have constructed this incredible, highly tuned machine of effectiveness. We have our principles, our schedule, our empathy, our synergy. But how do we keep it running without the engine burning out?
Exactly. If we go all the way back to the foundational metaphor of the goose and the golden egg,
Right.
we are producing massive amounts of golden eggs now. But how do we make sure the goose doesn't die of pure exhaustion?
That is the sole purpose of Habit 7, Sharpen the Saw. It is the habit of balanced, continuous self-renewal. If you look at a diagram of the 7 habits, Habit 7 circles all the others because it is the foundational maintenance that makes all the other habits possible. It's about preserving and enhancing your greatest asset, yourself.
The text breaks this renewal down into 4 specific dimensions of our human nature that we must regularly, proactively maintain. The physical, the spiritual, the mental, and the social-emotional. Let's unpack these. The physical dimension is exactly what it sounds like. It's caring for our physical body, eating the right foods, getting sufficient rest, and exercising on a regular basis to build endurance, flexibility, and strength.
But the text directly addresses the most common, universal excuse we all use. I don't have time to exercise. I'm too busy being effective in my career. The counterargument is profound. You do not have time not to exercise. We are talking about an investment of maybe 3 to 6 hours a week. That leaves roughly 162 hours in the rest of your week. The vitality, the energy, the mental focus, and the stress tolerance you gain from those 3 to 6 hours of physical renewal drastically elevate the quality and the output of the other 162 hours.
Okay, I hear that, but I have to represent the listener here. I have to push back. You are telling me I need to spend 2 hours on a Sunday planning my week, plus an hour a day on physical exercise, plus whatever time the spiritual and mental dimensions take. I have a full-time job, a commute, and 2 toddlers at home. Where exactly am I finding these extra 10 hours a week? It feels like another impossible burden.
It feels like a burden if you view it from a quadrant eye perspective, where you are just trying to survive the day. But remember habit 3. This is quadrant 2 activity. Yes, it requires an upfront investment of time. But by sharpening the saw, you cut down the tree twice as fast. The mental clarity you gain from exercise might allow you to finish a 2-hour work report in 45 minutes. You are actually creating time through increased capacity.
Fair enough. So let's look at the spiritual dimension. And to be clear, the text notes this isn't necessarily religious, though it certainly can be. The spiritual dimension is your core, your center, your commitment to your value system. It's the process of reconnecting with your lighthouses. For some, that is daily prayer and scripture study. For others, it's deep meditation or spending quiet time alone in nature or immersing yourself in great literature or moving music. It's whatever sweeps the dust off your soul and reminds you of your blueprint.
Next is the mental dimension. The sad reality is that for most people, their active mental development completely stops the day they graduate from formal education. They leave college and they stop reading seriously. They let their minds atrophy. Covey challenges us to get rid of the junk media, to stop the mindless scrolling and the excessive television, and to engage in continuous education. Read broadly and deeply. Start with a goal of a book a month, then push yourself to a book every 2 weeks. Write down your thoughts, plan, visualize. Keep the mental blade sharp.
Combining those first 3 dimensions, the physical, spiritual, and mental, creates what the text calls the daily private victory. The strong recommendation here is to spend 1 hour a day, every single day, renewing these 3 dimensions. It is the single most powerful, high-leverage quadrant 2 investment you can possibly make. It builds the massive intrinsic security needed to successfully navigate the 4th dimension, the social-emotional.
The social-emotional dimension is unique because it doesn't require you to set aside an hour in a quiet room. We renew our social and emotional strength in our everyday interactions with others. It is the actual practice of habits 4, 5, and 6. It's about consciously choosing to practice empathic listening when your spouse is upset, or choosing to look for a win-win synergy when you are in a tense meeting at work. True emotional security doesn't come from what other people think of you. It comes from living a life of deep integrity to your own principles.
And this brings us to the ultimate, overarching concept of the entire text, the upward spiral. As you consistently practice habit 7, as you carve out the time to renew yourself physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, you create an upward spiral of continuous human growth.
It is an iterative process. You learn something new, you commit to applying it, and you do it, but you don't stay there. The renewal of habit 7 pushes you back around the spiral. You learn more deeply, you commit more strongly, and you do more effectively. You are continuously moving upward on a higher and higher plane of character and effectiveness.
The 7 habits are clearly not a checklist you complete once and then frame on your wall. They are a lifelong struggle and a continuous process of becoming. The text emphasizes the inside-out approach one last time. The world, stuck in the personality ethic, constantly tells you that to be happy, you need to change your environment. You need a new boss, a new spouse, a new house, a new hack. But the inside-out approach dictates that if you want to change your environment, you must first change yourself. You change your paradigms, your character, your motives, and your influence will naturally transform the environment around you.
As we prepare to wrap up, there is a final, highly illuminating thought we need to address. In a Q&A section included at the end of the 25th anniversary edition, someone asked Stephen Covey himself a very pointed question. They ask, out of all 7 habits, which one does he personally struggle with the most?
You would think the man who synthesized these natural laws would say he has mastered them all. But his answer is incredibly revealing and deeply human. He admits that he struggles almost daily with habit 5. Seek first to understand. He confesses that when he is tired, when he is stressed, and when he is already absolutely convinced that he is right about an issue, he really doesn't want to put in the immense emotional labor required to listen to the other person. He says he might even pretend to listen. using superficial active listening techniques while secretly just waiting for his turn to speak.
If the master of these habits, the man who taught them to millions of people worldwide, struggled with them on a daily basis, what does that teach us about the true nature of effectiveness? It tells us that true mastery is not about achieving a state of robotic, flawless perfection. It is about self-awareness. It's about having the humility to recognize when the gravity of your old habits has pulled you off course, and having the character to consciously choose to realign your ship with the lighthouse.
Which brings us right back to where we started in the eye doctor's chair. The quick fix, the superficial Band-Aid, the Instagram filter over your character flaws, it is all a myth. You cannot cram on the farm. True effectiveness requires the hard, exhausting, continuous work of rewiring your paradigm. It requires the thrust to break the gravity pull of your reactive life. So we leave you with this final thought to mull over as you step back into your day. Look at the framework we've built. Which of the 7 habits are you personally struggling with the most today? Is it the courage to be proactive? Is it the discipline to live in quadrant 2? Or is it the humility to truly listen to someone else? Whatever it is, what is one small, manageable promise you can make and actually keep to yourself right now to begin your upward spiral? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.